Welcome everybody to today's session. We're just going to give people a minute to join. There's a few people still logging on, so we'll start very shortly. Thank you. Perfect. Well, it's 2 minutes past, so we'll make a start. A few people are still rolling in, but we'll get going. So welcome and thank you everyone for attending today's session. Hopefully today we're all here for the same thing, for an impactful session to understand a little bit more about the world of Windows 11. The real aim of today is to take a quick look at obviously the latest buzz in the EUC world, where Windows 11 has come from, where it's going, and how we can kind of get on board with it and hopefully answer some questions as we go. So to kind of explain a little bit more about who PowerOn are, because there are a few new faces on the call. By way of a quick introduction, PowerOn, essentially, we are a IT management and security specialist focused on delivering high impact professional services and proactive managed services across a range of EUC, security and backup and recovery services. Our support from a customer perspective ranges across the corporate and public sector bodies. I'm happy to share additional references and case studies where applicable, with that range stretching from the UK across the world. We're also backed with deep Microsoft specializations across things like endpoint, security and desktop, and obviously look to maintain our key industry accreditations and standards such as ISO and Cyber Essentials Plus as well. Happy to share more details of that at a later date, but conscious we're on a short session, so I'll jump on to the next slide. So to kind of take us through today's session, you've got two individuals. You've got myself, James Dennis, Head of Sales at PowerOn, really here hopefully to support the kind of customer engagement side of our conversation. Windows 11 has very quickly become the hottest topic, and the majority of the conversations I've had in the last 2 to 3 months, and is looking to fill up my December calendar as well. So there's obviously a lot of buzz in the industry around how we tackle it. I'm also joined by my colleague Steve Beaumont, our CTO, who will take us through the bulk of the good stuff today, on the demos, the suggestions, the recommendations, and the stuff that Steve will be taking through will take the format of our agenda on the right. So we'll take a quick look at the current situation. You know, Windows 10 was promised to be the last version, and here we are. So understanding how we've got to where we are. Now that Windows 11 is very much upon us, obviously getting a bit of clarity around where we start. And then more importantly, given that 2025 will mark the end of Windows 10, which seems like a distant timeline, it's really important to understand how we can get a head start today and get going. And then we've got some useful resources that some of our customers have found very useful to get going in this space, which we'll share at the end of the session as well. So with that, I'll hand over to Steve to take us through the good stuff and get into it, really.
Thank you very much, James. Good morning, everybody. So you'll be pleased to hear this is going to be a mixture of just some slides to give some introductory pieces, and then I'll jump into some actual demos around some of the consoles and bits and pieces. So talking about the current situation, well, Windows 11 needs you. So everyone within your organization is going to be looking at the people on this type of webinar on what your plans are going to be around getting Windows 11 out there into your environment. So whether you're on the dark side or the light side, you might notice a little bit of a thing going through this today. It's going to be very much key around the decisions that you help drive within your organization and some of the technologies and skills that you bring to get this out. So it's been a bit of a journey. Now, when Microsoft released Windows 10, they went with this evergreen approach, and they did so many multiple versions throughout the years. Started off with multiples per year, backed off slightly to twice a year, and then as we start to see in the last couple of releases, we've gone down to once a year. So we're currently on Windows 10 22H2 with no announcements about another release of Windows 10 on the roadmap. That's not to say there won't be, it's just to say at the minute, all we know is that basically Windows 10 is end of life in mid-2025. So we have a deadline. Now, running alongside Windows 10 at the minute is Windows 11. So we've got that whole ongoing now 2 OSs working in parallel, which is good because it gives us a bit of time to do that planning. And certainly when Windows 11 first came out, my personal stance was do not go. It was not ready. You needed some time to understand it. However, there is now a tipping point, and certainly with Windows 11 22H2, things have changed to much more of a stance of start deploying, start testing, start getting it out there. What comes along next year? So there would hopefully be, again, no announcements from Microsoft, a 23H2 release, or never say never with the whole changes from Windows 10 to Windows 11. We may even see versions of Windows 12 at some point in the next few years. Now, the reasons for saying that is it's becoming very clear that making sure that you have a plan of action to go from one OS to the next is important. Now, some of the things that we typically hear around this is, oh no, yet another large OS upgrade project. And as James mentioned a minute ago, what happened to that whole Windows 10 is the last version, you never need to do an OS upgrade project? One thing I will say is this is not to be thought of as the big 7 to 10 migration, or even for those as old as me, XP or 98 to XP, XP to Windows 7 and so forth. It should not be tackled as a mammoth big project. Remembering that slide that I've just gone through, that journey, it should still be under the same remit as the feature updates, with maybe just a little bit of extra communication stuff for users because of the amount of UI changes. But all the things that you hopefully are doing already with the evergreen lifecycle drive forward with your Windows 11. I'll just show you some more stuff as we go through. And for those organizations that are going, well, actually, we like Windows 10, we're happy with it, I don't want the complexity of start bars being realigned at the bottom or fancy file explorer tabs and so on, we'll stay on Windows 10, it's great. Please don't. You have, at the moment, a definitive deadline. Unless Microsoft do come up with a new announcement about Windows 10 23H2, you have until mid-2025. Don't leave it to the last moment. It's no good thinking, oh, right, great, it's now January 2025, we've got 4 or 5 months. That won't be enough for you to do your planning exercise and all the rest of it because you'll go into panic mode. Start your plannings now. It's also key to mention that a lot of manufacturers will soon start shipping devices with Windows 11 as default, and then you'll probably find it just comes into your environment without any control. So start now thinking about it. And for those organizations that then turn around and go, oh, we're too big, we're geographically distributed, we're even multinational, with just too many devices, it's going to take ages to deploy. Fine, it might do if you take that approach and you do it slowly, hence having that deadline. But there are customers out there where we're seeing case studies now where even with 10,000 plus devices, it only takes about 4 months for them to get this deployed. And that all comes back to the planning and testing, which we often hear is a hard thing for a lot of organizations, especially when it comes to things like lack of test kits. We haven't got physical hardware that we can go and deploy, try to give a user another device next to their business as usual laptop to test key critical applications, difficult, there's expenses in there. Well, let me show you some things that may potentially ease that. And that's all about the approach and some of the tools that we have at our disposal to make this a lot easier for yourself. Now, on that note, although I'm nowhere near as handsome as Ewan McGregor, I will be your guide for the next 25 odd minutes to show you some of the things that we can do to make you have a successful Windows 11 upgrade project and look at your approach to it. So where do we want to start? So it all starts with a plan. And in essence, if you make a plan, execute that plan, you should succeed within that plan. Now, this is the typical methodology that we at PowerOn use. So it breaks down into the various different phases. Anyone that's been on some of my previous webinars will be fairly familiar with this by now, but it's something that makes pretty damn logical sense. We talk about validation phase, where we actually start to look at the telemetry within the environment. Let's look at the metrics. What is it telling us? What hardware is compatible? Do we have things like TPM 2.0 missing off devices? What do we need to understand, as well as going out to the actual manufacturers and looking what their stance is in terms of hardwares and actually defining what our support model looks like. As well as in this piece, looking at what Microsoft are introducing within the stack of features that will make it easier for us to deploy. So doing all that validation phase, understanding what the features are, what the requirements are, will allow us to build that initial plan for when we go into preparation of looking at actually updating any tool sets that we have, any standard operating processes that should absolutely be in place to make sure this process runs smoothly, to then start to assemble everything we need to assess things like applications, the compatibility, and the actual hardware with the actual operating system as we move into that test phase. Now, test phase is quite obvious. That's where we need to actually get things out in the hands of IT and key users of applications, so any application owners and so on, to do that verification piece before we move across into the actual pilot and broad deployment phases. And then the missing bit for most organizations is the improvement phase, taking your lessons learned from across these and deliberately wrapping them back in for the next time, because that is the important bit. Going back to the whole evergreen story, even a Windows 11 migration, you will still then be doing the 22, 23, 24 H2 releases and potentially Windows 12, 13, however Microsoft wants to do it. But it all runs across the same methodology. There is still the same deployment mechanisms, whether it's a in OS version update or a full OS feature update. Great. So moving forward, I mentioned around things like the preparation phase, updating your platforms. So again, another slide that if you were on my last preparing for management, modern management, you'll be used to this slide. But I just wanted to reintroduce this very quickly again, because it's all about how we're going to get Windows 11 out to the different personas of our users within the business. So we're going to look at different delivery platforms. Now, I've obviously added in quite cheekily the Windows 12 piece on there, because again, this is about making sure that we have something that can work moving forwards, regardless of the actual operating system. And I will introduce a few of the different delivery platforms in terms of 365 and DevBox, which is something new, alongside just looking at how we do this on physical devices. And then obviously we have the actual management platforms and how you're actually going to push this out there. Talk about the updating side of it. If you're using things like config manager and stuff, you're going to have to make sure that those platforms are updated to allow you to deliver the relevant different feature updates in terms of Windows 11, etc. Cloud platforms like InTune are generally updated for you, but then you just concentrate on your controls and your settings along it. So the interesting bit for today is how we can actually help you be aware of some of the technologies and stuff that can get you a head start into doing some of this in actuality. So very quickly, just introduce with a couple of slides some of the areas that I want to demo. So going back to that whole plan side of it, with the plan and execute, the validation phase is heavily reliant on analytics. So I'll show you a couple of bits within the InTune platform where we can go and get more information regarding things like capabilities, the actual blockers for deployment, compatibility of applications and stuff, and actually use that as our first basic validation piece to see what we need to do within the environment to make this a successful project. Also want to introduce something called Testbase. So doing that application testing, there are multiple different schools of thoughts on this. There's obviously the whole just go and give it to users, install it manually on the updated operating system, see how it performs. There are options to allow us to do much more of an automated and ongoing continuous evaluation of applications on different operating systems, different quality updates. So I will introduce and just show very quickly Testbase, if my slides want to progress today. talk very quickly and show you in the console around the Windows Update for Business deployment service. So this is something that is underneath the Windows Update for Business in the cloud and is actually using some analytics to help stage gate your deployments. So it gives you a much quicker way to get it deployed out to your estate, but in a safe way by looking at the data that Microsoft have regarding the devices and then choosing automatically in whatever, if you're still using deployment rings, saying within this ring of the group of devices you've deployed, it's going to analyze it and say, actually, I want to break this down into different hardware models, use samples of it, samples of devices with specific applications, and then if it sees errors, stop the deployment or put devices to the back of it to basically prevent just crashes constantly right at the beginning to allow you to move at speed. So we'll look at that within the console. And then, as I mentioned, about the delivery options. How can we actually look at different mechanisms to get the updated operating system out to users to test, validate, without interrupting both their business as usual or becoming a costly exercise of finding hardware that we have to fling all over the place? And as I mentioned, DevBox, if I don't mention it, remind me because it's something new to this whole side. Enough of slides. Let's get in and actually look at some of this in actuality. So this is the InTune console. For those of you that are familiar with using InTune, you'll know that we have a couple of different areas where we can go and get some metrics. So I'm currently just sat in the actual report side of it with the Windows Update tab. This allows me to have just a very quick, easy glance of while we're deploying, what's going on, how many devices are crashing, which ones have succeeded, etc. Or you can drill down and you have a range of new reports that currently are in preview. Obviously, the feature update report is probably one of the first ones to go hit because, again, it just tells you what's going on in terms of your rollout. So you just get a little bit more visibility into just how well that is flowing. So once you've started your deployments, great, you've got some metrics to understand it. But we also have things like the device readiness and compatibility risks report. Now, these are really useful for wanting to understand what's going to happen when you start your deployments or while you're planning it, because we get visibility straight away around different issue areas where there might be a problem, including as well what the risk of upgrading that device is. So certainly as you're looking for pilot test groups, etc., if you want a really quick and easy way to understand what is going to be the low risk, quick impacts to get stuff out there, you can basically come in here and then sample it to say, right, fine, I'm now going to deploy it across these 5, 10, 15 initial devices to be able to get a very quick, low risk upgrade experience to see what's going on as I tackle the other devices. Now, unfortunately, within this environment, I haven't got anything else that is actually showing it as a medium or a high risk or anything with any app issues, mainly because we're continuously within this environment, making sure that applications, third-party apps are updated, drivers, etc. So we're not usually lagging behind to show anything. However, it does allow you to drill down into each one of these and then see if you had the data there, what applications may be causing problems, why, what version, so you get the list of the issues, etc. And again with drivers and other, which generally relates to things like safeguard holds and so on. Now, for those of you that have used desktop analytics in the past, which was actually sunsetted back in November last year, was this year, well, previously, this is basically taking a lot of the evolution of them reports and stuff and moving them away from desktop analytics and now into InTune, so you have these to hand to use. One of your first starting points to go and look at what needs to be done within your environment should absolutely be this device readiness report. There is an additional one as well, which under desktop analytics or endpoint analytics, under the bizarrely work from anywhere Windows tab, we also get a very quick roll up side under which devices would be capable of taking Windows 11. And that, for those that might not be aware, is because Microsoft specifically introduced some hardware requirements for Windows 11. You must have things like a TPM2 chip. You must have a specific CPU family. So by that, what I mean is there are some older things like Intel CPUs and stuff which are just not supported for Windows 10, and as well as some certain firmware requirements as well, so certain minimum levels of firmware. This report will identify that and show you whether devices are not capable because of them reasons: TPM, CPU family, firmware, and so on. This again is another starting point just to understand that you may need to physically replace equipment in your environment because it is just not Windows 11 capable. So start with these two main reports: the Endpoint Analytics Work From Anywhere Windows report to get the hardware assessment of whether devices need replacing. Then you can use that as part of your budgeting experience for the rollout. Decide whether they are just going to be left till later, whether they need to be brought forward, and so on. And then the other reports within the normal Windows Update side for assessing the application initial compatibility and driver compatibility and safeguard holds. Analytics, absolutely use them. Now there are some new ones that Microsoft are introducing. So we've always had for a while this thing called Windows Update Compliance that kind of sits just slightly outside of InTune. It can be theoretically used without InTune as long as the devices are sending their telemetry to the Vortex. You can then get access to that information and see what it means for your estate. Now Microsoft have now moved this so you get a partial view within the Windows, the M365 Admin Center. So you can see under Software Updates, under Health, we have the Windows tab, and I can start to see how well I'm doing in terms of running supported operating systems, but with a little breakout so that I can actually go to the Windows Update for Business reports. Now these are stored within the Log Analytics workspace within Azure, and these new reports start to bring back even more information regarding the devices, so you can get things like the overview reports and see what's going on, again your eligibility, so you can start to see just how well devices are going to be able to deploy or take Windows 11. So you get lots of different metrics, and this is similar to what I was saying before. See here, there is a device that does not have a TPM or secure boot. It's actually an Azure VM, which is why it doesn't have either of it, because it's Gen 1. But it's reasons like that that are going to flag up to say that you cannot upgrade them to Windows 11, so therefore they're going to need a replacement, or in our case, just a redeployment within Azure for better virtual hardware as such. And again, this keeps on breaking down, so you can see much more information around just the general device, the monthly quality updates, and again, more within the feature updates, being able to drill really down into see individually what's going on, what was it cancelled, more information around when its last times were, and so on. So rich information, including warnings, that will actually help you manage the deployment both from beforehand, not sure why that's returning 0 when it's got 3, from beforehand as we do the analysis side, right through to the ongoing deployment. So I always say data is king. Use what you have available to you with very little setup requirement needed to get this information flowing ASAP. Just pause for a second. Just did notice a quick question on the side of it. Do we get any of the metrics within Config Manager, or is it an InTune only feature? So obviously the reports that are within the actual InTune portal are InTune only. You will have limited information, or there is obviously some data within the database that you can go and create your own reports from. The update compliance is completely independent. So you can use Config Manager or GPO to configure the requirements for telemetry and stuff on the device, but then it's Windows itself that's pumping this information up. So you can absolutely use the Windows Update for Business reports with any sort of deployment technology tools. Excellent. So that's the data and the telemetry side. I mentioned about testing, so Testbase. So this has been coming in from Microsoft for a while. It was originally mainly focused around independent software vendors for testing their own applications. However, there's been a couple of different things that have come through that now allow us to actually use it as an enterprise side for testing some of our applications. So if I go into my test summary, I can see here that I had Adobe Reader that I am constantly testing against both Windows 10 21H2 and currently Windows 11 21H2. So every month when the updates come out, this basically goes and runs an installation running test, so it can perform functional tests and an uninstallation test. And I get lots of information around how well did it succeed, did it install okay. I can drill down into the things. I can see about its reliability, how well did it uninstall, memory utilization, CPU utilization. So lots of interesting metrics to let me know whether this application still works on the feature update and the OS. And I can keep on adding in new feature updates or automatically let it deploy to the latest as they come out to automate my installation and functionality tests. Just another thing to think around if you have something where you have requirements, and certainly on key applications, to make sure that they can install on the target operating system. The good news is, and this is where I say the improvements happened, if you are an InTune customer and you have your applications already packaged for deployment, you can now actually come in here and just quite easily consume them into Testbase. So you still need to provide the raw file that you gave to InTune in the first place, but then I can actually say, well, fine, I want to go and browse my applications. Let me go and do a search for something like 7-zip. There it is. Oops. 7-zip. Bring that into the portal and it will drag stuff across and through into it. Usual demo gods have just failed me nicely because I've got stuff within the name of the application, which I should be aware of from doing this, but I could just tweak certain bits of it and we'll probably get back to a state where I can get in okay or not. There we go. But you can go through and you can load this in and then it will start to do the whole testing side of it. I haven't got the file to hand, but you configure what tests you want to do, what operating systems, and let it go and validate it. However, that's obviously only a simulated test. We said before around the whole idea of being able to build up this plan on the different areas and getting applications out with the updated operating system, with the new policies to end users without new hardware is sometimes a little bit of a challenge. So there is this lovely thing from Microsoft around Windows 365 and AVD and DevBox that we can potentially leverage to make this easier. So while I don't want to interrupt a user's normal business as usual activity, and I don't want them to feel like they have to turn another physical device on, sit at the side, have multiple monitors, I want them in and testing. So I can use Windows 365 to basically give them a very quick virtual machine that applies all of our organization policies, all of our applications in exactly the same deployment manner, because these devices are registered within InTune. So if I go to my devices Windows, you will see that that PC, I happen to know it's this one, is just sat there with the normal policies applied, the application, so I can see all that side of things. It is a managed object within the environment. Now I can either launch that from a web browser, so I just have to point users to a URL, or it comes under the whole Office app launcher side of it. Or they can have a fancy little application which just is dedicated to Windows 365, or you can use the actual remote desktop client. There's so many different entry points into here, you choose the one that fits. Now, if I do go and open this, I could open it within the web browser, but I might as well open it in my remote desktop app, and it will just launch seamlessly. It will respect on a corporate device your Windows 11 for Business and so on, any single sign-on. So I just get a pin prompt. I've not got my camera operational at the moment, but that just signs me straight in to my Windows 365 device, where I can then start to do that business as usual, or that line of business app testing as a key critical application owner. There we go, I'm in, I've got full screen, but I can run it alongside my daily work, so I'm not interrupting. So I've got a test version over here, actual operational usage over there, without having to have lots of overhead, VMware Horizon boxes and so on that I have to manage. It's very low cost infrastructure and admin overhead to deploy this. However, I appreciate there is a monthly license cost for that, which is where DevBox can come in. So DevBox is currently under preview from Microsoft, but it's a different deployment mechanism that still uses the Windows 365 infrastructure, still appears within the portal in the same manner. So if I go back to here and look at Windows 365, I can untick my PC type equals, and I will now see DevBox alongside my other normal Windows 365, but it's just hosted within Azure. And yes, it is mainly focused towards developers, but there's nothing to stop you using it for other reasons like testing within your Windows 11 upgrades. The biggest difference is this is built on a usage basis. And if you start to add in the scheduling of auto shutdowns and starts and so on, so it's not left turned on out of hours, it only tends to turn either on when somebody clicks start. So you can actually go and start this VM manually, or just try to connect to it and it will connect, start on connect. You have a lower cost entry point to use just for testing with no extra requirements for Windows 365 licensing and so on, just pay as you use. Other than that, it works exactly the same way. You can see it's within my Cloud PC portals. Users don't need to know or have any other expectations on it. You get the same prompts and it joins with the same manner. This just happens to be a Windows 10 box that I was using for development, and it will sign me in and it will be the same sort of experience. There we go, and you can see that this one has basically got my Visual Studios and stuff assigned to it, because it literally is my dev box. So I was doing some dev on, but same sort of aspect. Users don't need the interruption, don't have to go find different devices, swap screens. It's just very quick, very simple to deploy and target for users, very simple to access for users, with very little admin overhead to manage any sort of infrastructure across it. You focus on what is important, and that is the Windows 11 deployment, the settings, and the applications on there as you're testing them. Final thing for me is just in the demo world is to do the Windows Update for Business side, which if I come into my Windows side, this is where we use feature update policies to deploy out the actual deployment. So this is where we were testing within our initial pilot ring for 21H2. However, if we want to deploy out Windows 11 22H2, we would choose what version we want, and then we get to choose whether we want to make it gradually available. So by making it gradually available, as long as your devices have the policy to enroll them into the whole Windows Update for Business deployment service cloud processing, bit of a mouthful, this will allow it to say, I will define my start and end dates. So I want to start this deploying on Friday. No, I've left it too long. It will now only allow it to be 19th. Never mind. Oh, no, sorry, that's because my second availability group. Then I will make it run through until the 23rd of December. I want to say automatically batch whatever I target this at into groups every 7 days between that time period, and do the analysis to make sure that they pick within that group which devices out of the combination of hardware and software and so on. But I'm going to deploy this to basically everything. So all managed Windows devices, review and create. And that is actually now Windows 11 22H2 basically running live within this environment to all of our devices. Like I say, we'd done our pre-testing, we'd known about it. We kind of skipped doing yet another run of 22H2 by this manner because we'd already done some manual testing. We'd already raised the change control. We've already done our application compatibility. You saw in all my reports that everything was ready. I've now just staged that update out across all the devices within this environment, running across the next couple of months in batches of 7, and let the cloud deployment service automatically decide which ones should be brought into the first groups based on hardware, software, and it will then start to move stuff around depending on how successful it is in bringing things forward. Excellent. So I hope a lot of that made sense. Obviously happy to have more conversations outside of this, but I'm appreciative that I'm already overrunning, which is nothing new for me. So basically, go. Start looking at this. Start looking at testing your policies. You may find that there's very little that needed to be added or changed for Windows 11. We have identified internally about 3 new policies, and that's about it. There's some awareness to be done around things like credential guard and stuff that on new machines will be enabled by default, but there's not a great deal of change to have to worry about. But start communicating, get the information out to your business and the end users, start spreading the good news of what is coming. And it's a key critical part of the whole planning exercise is communication. Look at some of the tools and some of the deployment methods that I've shown you within this and help get some early feedback from your end users over what works or doesn't work. Then absolutely look at the utilizing the cloud processing element of the deployment service to speed up your rollout instead of going very slowly, waiting and manually checking for failures and stuff. Let the system do that for you and start to roll out at a faster pace. But get engaged with them key users earlier. Make sure that they are working alongside your automated methods for testing things with actual manual testing, but in a way that doesn't disrupt their business as usual activities, so they actually do it. And start using all that data. Data is king and absolutely should be understood to look at your planning exercise. So, key thing to this is you should absolutely be the hero with this deployment within your environment. If you have that plan and having guiding hand from people like ourselves to make this a success. Now, before I move on, I'll just check the next question that I've just seen popped in. That's around if devices are co-managed when you manage updates and applications with Config Manager, can we look at this metric within InTune, or are we forced to manage the Windows updates workload exclusively with InTune in order to unlock the update and application report features? That's a very good question. So, in theory, no, you should still get a lot of that metrics flowing through into the Windows Update for Business reports. Some of it will appear within InTune, but most of the reports are based around actually having groups and the feature update policies assigned that it can analyze. So you will lose out on some of the reporting. I would say that unless you have a very strong business need to use Config Manager for doing patching or feature updates, take a look at moving at least that workload across into InTune. It's all about simplifying the process and handing over some of the controls. There is not usually the need these days, with quality updates being basically one update, to have to really granularly control, at least for Windows client devices, the updating process. Servers, different matter, different ways to handle it. Keeping Config Manager will look at different ways, but desktops, seriously, it's not as complicated as it used to be with the fragmented approach to updates, and it's a lot easier just to do it within InTune these days. But more than happy if you reach out to us to dive into that in a lot more detail. So just as I start to wrap up, main key takeaway is look to be that hero that can take some of this information to form that plan. Use people like ourselves and information like this and community to get that guidance to make this a success for your organization. James, I don't know whether you wanted to jump back in at this point.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate that run through. Good to see some of that stuff live. So hopefully today's session has been quite useful. If there's any last questions, do fire them into the chat and we'll action and I'll follow up. But 2 other bits that are kind of top of mind and potentially useful just to share with you. So we are looking to potentially run more interactive, hands-on, techie-to-techie webinar stuff. So no slideware, you know, just time with perhaps some of our lead EUC consultants or more time with Steve to actually see live demos, live config in action against some of the stuff we've seen today and other management tools and other bits and pieces. So would be really useful if people would like to see more short, impactful 15-minute, 30-minute live, you know, how to configure something, how to pull certain reports, whatever it might be. If you could give the original post in the chat a like, where it says ask questions from our moderator, Rhiannon. If you give that post a little like, if there is popularity, we will start to run more impactful techie to techie demo type stuff and less kind of slideware. So again, if there's interest, we will support that. But if you want a more personalized touch, we do run essentially a session similar to what Steve has just taken us through, but on a much sort of deeper level and at a one-to-one basis. So we call them our Windows 11 readiness workshops. They can be 90 minutes to 2 hours to help you understand your current estate and some of the considerations we've touched on today. And that can also bleed into considerations around Windows 365 and AVD and stuff. So again, if you want that personalized workshop flavor, which is complimentary, free of charge, again, reach out after this and we can let you know. Appreciate the likes coming through. So what we'll do is obviously keep you updated of any news and information, but if any of the stuff today covered or the stuff on screen is of interest, please do let us know. For those of you who don't have contact information, if we just jump to the last slide, there will be some information on screen, but if you've got a PowerOn account representative, please reach out. But unless there's any other questions dropping into the chat, happy to wrap up there and we'll send the recordings and other information out shortly. Perfect. All right, I don't think there's any more questions. So in that case, I think we'll call it a day there. But thank you for everyone's time and attending. We'll share everything across shortly. And any other questions, you know where to reach us. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.